Hello and welcome to all the ghouls and vampires out there. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And today we've got quite the review for you all. As you can tell from the title, it's the 1997 miniseries movie, or TV movie, not sure which, House of Frankenstein from 1997. This was released in a way that was meant to honor the original House of Frankenstein, except where that movie was an hour or so long, the production cast and the people at Universal Studio decided that they would release this movie, or whatever it is, as something of a more long-winded story. That is to say, almost 3 hours long. And they pump in a lot of detail into it, and we're only going to look at part one. Now, part one gets into a series of serial murders where you have what is termed the Raptor murders, which is a very bizarre name, and the characters themselves react with disgust and disdain towards the name, which is pretty funny. And the main character is Vernon Coyle, which is a pretty weird name. And the character himself doesn't like his name. He doesn't like the name Vernon, or Coyle for that matter. But he's the best detective on the force at present. And what he ends up doing is he at the start is trying to look only into, well, how shall we put it? Into possible logical murderers. He does not believe a certain lady who's calling him on the phone constantly, or some of his detectives on the phone, that it's a master vampire, as she describes it. To him, this is ridiculous. And throughout part one, he typically just prefers to ignore her calls because she's clearly nuts, is what he's thinking. Actually, she's not. Meanwhile, the city of Los Angeles has mostly come under the sway of a rich interest group called Grimes. And Grimes, or Crispin Grimes, as he's called, is a massive investor who owns huge parts of LA real estate. And he's invested enormously in the city. But he's also in control of the seedy underbelly of the city. And he's recently opened up a club, or is looking to open up a club, called the House of Frankenstein, where there will be monsters and whatnot displayed and whatnot, or fake monsters. Now, he's been looking for quite some time in the Arctic for what turns out to be the monster. And Adam Frankenstein awakens in the modern world, very confused because he went north to perish, and awakens to find that he's in the modern day. He doesn't much like it. Who could blame him? I don't even like modernity. Anyways.
And even L.A.
Yeah, poor guy. Now, this is beyond what he deserved.
I mean,
not even he deserves this.
I mean, sure, you expect a vampire to be at home in L.A.
Well, yeah, but would you actually wish L.A. upon Adam Frankenstein? I wouldn't. He deserves a lot, but not even he deserves that.
Yeah, maybe just New York rather than L.A.
Yeah, that's fair. And, because, come on, I wouldn't wish California on my worst enemy. And the thing is that Adam Frankenstein is suitably confused and quickly tries to steal shoes. They're not even decent shoes. Only to get in trouble with the law, flee, and get found by a blind guy, or a half-blind guy, who takes him in, and the two become roommates for a bit. And the thing is, with Adam, the idea is that his story followed the novel, and then he got frozen, and then he's unthawed. So that how they bring him into the modern world is through the movie backstory of Frankenstein. That is to say that he was frozen and he's unthawed through scientific means. But everything up to that point was the novel backstory. So this is a really great idea, and this is really well done in that you have references to the book. That's clearly the backstory of the character, but then they give massive nods to the Universal and even some of the Hammer Frankenstein film history. So this is actually the sort of thing that this is really well done. This is how you reboot something or a franchise. Now, that's how Frankenstein's monster comes into this. So we've introduced the main hero, the vampire, the monster, and now for the werewolf. Now, oh, and we've also kind of introduced the Van Helsing character. She's a middle-aged black woman. So normally this is the sort of thing that a lot of people would object to in today's day and age. But the way it's written and the way the cops treat her, it makes sense. And not to mention, she's not actually Van Helsing himself. So I don't have too much of a problem here. This is a different kind of vampire hunter character. That aside, we then get the werewolf. Now, in this case, it's not a he, like with Larry Talbot, but a she. And boy, is she hot. I'm just saying. The actress is really beautiful. But the thing about the character of Grace Dawkins is that she ends up running into trouble one night when she's trying to dodge a overzealous potential paramour who's getting a little too handsy, and she rejects, and then he's complains, well, you're not going to file any complaints or anything at the office, are you? Like, he was harassing her. No, like, even before he made a move, he was harassing her. I mean, talking about a serial murderer running around, and basically, I was finding him creepy. And he's assaulted by a werewolf who clearly thought he was being creepy as well. Then the wolf makes a move on her and scratches her, and she escapes after macing it, which is awesome. I love that she maces the werewolf. That was hilarious. Good to know mace is actually something that, while the werewolf has massively quick recovery time, good to know it is effective. So ladies, or any potential lady listeners, should you ever run into a werewolf, remember, mace. Don't go for a gun, go for mace.
And if it is illegal for you to have mace in your area,
Tough.
carry bear spray.
Yeah. Carry bear spray or mace anyways.
I mean, that's weird that this is in Canada. Bear spray is worse than mace. But she uses techniques that women are told, use these
to protect yourselves. Yeah. Not that she's not prone to panicking sometimes, because she does when the werewolf tries to assault her in her apartment building. She then drops the key because she panics so much and takes off down a doorway and then a stairwell, and is wigged out when he actually turns back into a human, opens the door, pushes the door, turns back into a werewolf. So he has perfect control over his werewolf transformation process, which, okay. Her not being able to count on that, I don't blame her. Like, clearly, it's not a full moon yet, and clearly he's demonstrating a mastery of his wolf form that has never been shown in any other film franchise and whatnot.
There's an implication that he spent so much time
with the curse
that he understands a lot more about how to use his abilities.
What I like about him is that if you look at his jawline, his jawline looks like that of Lon Chaney Jr. So it's a case where, like, you can read into it that, I don't know, that they were maybe giving a connection or a nod to Larry Talbot in some capacity. But as for Grace, after she's scratched, she's treated very in a very kindly manner by Coyle, who this is his first real person of interest who survives one of these murders. So he's relieved with that, but treats her with kindness. He doesn't forget that she's also a lady. And of course, she ends up reciprocating and being more than pleased. Now, in the subsequent scenes with her, what can be noticed is that she's beginning to change. Her hearing's getting better, her sense of smell's getting better, and she's got more hormones, apparently, as she ends up. Well, let's just say she ends up rather liking her detective quite a bit. And yeah, from there the two start dating, and the on the other end of things, Mr. Not Dracula ends up, after disposing of an environmentalist who morally offended even him, which is funny. I like it.
It's like, well, I can't help but think of the scene. It's like, not Dracula. Look at the scene. Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, the environmentalist. Yeah, whatever. I want
like,
$2 million.
Sure, there was the city, but there was a good scene of.
Oh yeah, then like you and I are both. I think the term in English is ruralist. We're both nature lovers, and the mentality we have is not to look to the city, but to look to like the forest and the mountains and the highlands, and to appreciate that. And that's where the vampire here, now he looks to the city and thinks that's beautiful. But to his mind, it's, if you're an environmentalist, you should be looking in the opposite direction and be like, he could at least understand that. But this guy, he does not understand, and he is offended by it because he sees it as, my castle is a castle of steel and of wealth. Your castle is that of nature.
We're in a mountain path.
This is what you treasure. And this guy, I don't treasure it. I don't care. Give me $2 million. So that you just have Grimes is just, I just love how he just looks at this guy with in utter disgust. Like, what is wrong with you? And it's not that Grimes has any ethics whatsoever, but
you made him look like he had the high ground.
Yeah, which I actually like that. There's someone that even a vampire would get offended by, because it's like, wow. But on the other hand, clearly, there are one of the most evil characters is Grimes, and towards the end he decides to cut his losses and have his werewolf disposed of, because he can just get a new one, which tactically it makes sense, because the current werewolf is clearly more trouble than he's worth, and he keeps going out and getting into more trouble, breaking more laws, and then constantly phone calling the company lawyer to come and bail him out, which the company lawyer eventually just, I like the scene where he just says, I can't keep bailing this guy out. Like, eventually they're going to get something on him, because he keeps going out there and breaking the law. Like, I can't keep protecting him, and I don't want to keep protecting him. And you pretty much have Grimes who goes, then we're not going to. We're just going to get rid of him. Pulls out a silver bullet and says, 1 silver bullet. That's all it'll take to solve our problems. Now, Grimes ends up confessing to having committed the crime later, or at least to being party to it, which is what sets Coyle against him. Before that, he was clearly charming Coyle in some capacity. But Coyle now is convinced he's guilty. Now, by this time, he's starting to realize that he's not dealing with a regular human being, but with a vampire. And he's worried for Grace, and Grace ends up... she agrees to go stay at his sister's with him. As for her bestie, she was at one point made into a vampires and reports the information to Mr. Master Vampire, and the two, well, conspire against poor Grace, and Grace ends up, of course, abducted at the end. Now, throughout the film, the best friend was not jealous and was typically depicted as being amused and even using terms like our little flowers, no, wait, our little, what was it? I forget the term used, but it's like she's finally flowering. Like she's a little girl who's finally blossoming into a full-grown woman. But a English major would probably waste their breath and comment upon how really the vampirist betrayal thing is probably a metaphor for the overall idea that this is an insecure, jealous woman who envies the greater fortunes of Grace. But we're not going to go there, and sometimes the curtains are just the curtains. I'm joking. But yeah, you can read that into it, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. As for Adam, Grimes breaks into his apartment that he shares with the blind guy. And by this time, Adam, who has had a moment of tranquility where he picked up the ball of a little girl and handed it back to her, in what is clearly a nod to the 1931 Frankenstein movie. But the difference is, rather than getting the idea to drown her or something, he hands it back to her, and then looks like he came to a realization, and there's a look of utter sorrow and desolation on his face as he realizes how alone he is. At least that's what I read into it. I found myself pitying him in that scene. The blind guy clearly isn't fully reading the mood. Like, he's just proud that at least Adam made a bit of a connection with a human being, but Adam is sorrowing for the fact that he's not human. So that we get a scene where he clearly envies humanity. And he decided after that, in his next scene, he says, I have to go to the Arctic. I have to go back. And Armando, the blind guy, doesn't want him to go back because he's gotten attached to his roommate in the weeks that he's been there. Armando is not someone with a lot of family. And he's not someone who's well liked by others. Well, especially with the shining sun flag in the background, which I love that flag, but most don't. It's the Navy flag of Japan. But most tend to associate it more with the war crimes of the early 20th century that Japan committed in the lead up to World War II and during World War II. To which I say, yeah, okay, fair. No, it's okay, fair. But I tend to also look at that flag and think of the Meiji Revolution and all the good that came out of that. And the Shining Sun flag was also a flag that saw Japan liberated from from the black ships of Perry, it saw Russia try to oppress Japan and Japan fight them off and liberate themselves. And honestly, the trouble is that the flag has a loaded history. On the one hand, you can argue there was a lot of evil done in the name of that flag. Yeah, there was. There was also some good. So it's something that I think that every person has to decide for themselves what it means to them on a historic basis and whatnot. So if, let's say, you're Chinese or you're Korean and you say, I really don't like that flag because of what was done to my ancestors or my people.
Fair.
Yeah, I'm not going to judge. I will actually say, you're well within your rights. If you're Japanese and you say, yeah, but for us it was liberation. It gave us basic human rights. It elevated our standard of living, gave us a new era of literature and culture, and brought us so much good. Fair. That's fine. Take the meaning that you want from it, because, it's not something that has nothing but bad to its name, like the swastika. I'm just saying. It's not for us to decide the political meanings of such things. We're French, so for us, it doesn't carry any meanings. I'm just saying. But I'm sure to Asia, it's a much more heated topic. But Armando is clearly someone who likes to instigate um, arguments like that. So he's a very complex character, even though he only has a few scenes. And that flag and his war history, doubtless, the impression I had was that he did not fight against Japan, but that he respected them to an extent as enemies of America. He's not terribly fond of his country because he's, I think, a Vietnam War veteran, and to him he got, well, his eye has been damaged in the war. He can barely walk, and all he has is a disability check and no real support. So clearly, he probably, like, I will argue, he could use some work, an actual job, but this is where a sewing job or something should have been imported into the country. Like, like massive sewing jobs or something should have been imported into America so that people like him who need to sit down for hours at a time because they can't stand up and do things like, I don't know, build something. And this was before computers. You might as well give him a sewing machine and have him do that for a large company and pay him like $30 an hour. I'm just saying. That'd be the best possible way of helping him. But Armando has not received that kind of help. And if you're going to give him welfare, far be it for me to judge, if you're going to give him that, it should be enough for him to make ends meet, not barely scrape together a living and need to, basically beg someone to be his roommate to help save him from poverty. That's disgusting. So yeah, there's a lot of social messages and commentary being offered about it when it comes to Armando. And I'm not taking a political side. I'm just saying there's some legitimate criticism to be levied at the system as it is. It is what it is. And the thing is, as far as horror goes, this movie has a great sense of and grasp of it. The writing is flawless. The direction is great. The effects are a little dated, and the effects in some cases are used to great effect. Like the whole idea of, the CG scenes, that's apparently how the vampire sees when he goes full bat or something. It's a sonar. I thought that was fascinating. I don't know about you.
That
added a layer.
That worked a lot better.
Do you think maybe that's how he sees even in his human form? It'd be interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah, like, there's some interesting ideas.
Maybe it's an aspect that in his human form he could turn a bit more on and off.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. As for Adam, what do you think of how, like, when Armando is slain, how he immediately breaks down? They're clearly going with a more sympathetic interpretation of the character.
Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help but think that maybe at the end of the story, Victor and the one Marine captain both help redeem Adam. Because sure, at the end of the book, Adam was so self-pitying that and the captain was like, it's like, I didn't agree with everything that Victor did.
But don't you pin all the blame on him. You are what you choose to be.
He at least regretted his choice. He at least tried to do something. And the fact that that Adam, he never truly learned English.
Why, c'est vrai?
Because he went after...
Well, he was German, wasn't he? Or Swiss?
He went after essentially a German or Swiss doctor. Didn't matter if he started out in London. Yeah, he recognized Henry as Victor's friend, hence why.
Yeah, but he quickly traveled east to the mainland, I always get confused whether he's Swiss or German. It changes on the depiction, but I believe in the book he's more German.
Yeah.
So, obviously, Adam would probably understand German. And I caught a hint of German accent at one point in the film. So
Yeah.
I think they're going more with the German. And the trouble is, Adam, like, the problem is after his friend is slain, he's arrested, which is the worst possible thing you could do. And he's basically to all but be prosecuted without evidence. Funny how they were saying, well, we don't have evidence, and then you basically have an illegal immigrant, and he's saying, yes, I'm illegal, but I'm from the Arctic. Please deport me there. And they're like, nah, we gotta. He's the best suspect we have, and you have them. Only thing is, he has a psych problem because he thinks he's Adam Frankenstein. Dear heavens.
Which,
This police force, I'm just saying, they're clear. Well, they're from LA, so.
sure, the one lawyer, she's like, I want
Yeah,
him,
she's better than the one DA guy.
where she's like, I want him properly psychologically profiled isn't the way, but she wants a proper diagnosis.
Because
which,
Okay, yeah. She's
which-
better than the male lawyer. The male lawyer is just, don't let me do my job. Okay. Well, he's a lawyer. Lawyers don't like hard work. It's why they went into legal studies. And if anyone's a lawyer, I meant every word of it.
So sue us. Actually, please don't.
We don't own anything of value. We're bums. Almost as well, actually, I might be as broke as Armando. But anyways, yeah. So, what do you think of this first part?
It's actually really good. I mean, comparing it to Mummy, I don't think it's appropriate. I think comparing it more to Bright would be better, and I prefer this over Bright.
Yeah. Well, I will admit that the part 1 and part 2 put together, I actually prefer this flick to The Mummy. I really, really do like this flick, and I find that this. I love the 90s miniseries and whatnot. This is shot like it's a Hallmark fantasy thing, except horror instead of fantasy. And I really love it in that regard. Because I remember the Snow Queen, the Merlin film, or miniseries movie, and the 10th Kingdom. I really love these. And this is shot just like that. But this is in the Bronze Age of horror. At least when I say the Bronze Age, I mean the 90s. And this was apparently a side project that was just like spare cash was being chucked in this direction. Put together a flick for us. Here's some spare cash. And I think that they did a great job with what was essentially hand-me-down money.
I actually enjoyed the fact that it was a police
Procedural.
mystery flick. And this is definitely something that they could not have done over in the 40s.
No.
Over when they made the original House of Frankenstein.
Yeah, wait till part 2. What I call the House of Dracula part of the house of this flick. Because you only saw half. The other half is coming up, where they start the hunt. But here's the thing. Part 2 is going to assume a lot of the plot of the Dracula novel, as the characters then begin the hunt for the vampire, and it's set up with the same plot beats as the Dracula novel, except with, of course, Vernon Coyle, the one professor. She's going to assume the role of mentor, and you're going to have a few other characters who are going to come together, and you got your and you can guess who's probably going to assume the role of Mina, our dear canine lady. So they cast her more in the role of Mina to an extent, to a limited extent, and the writing is very sharp, I think. The only thing is Grimes is there's some shaky writing on a few points, but we'll see. We will not rate this until the next part, which I'll release shortly, because at the time of this recording, it's being recorded on 2 different occasions. But we'll release part 2 review within a few days because, well, part 1 and part 2 should come as a pair. But if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were a werewolf tearing into it.